We all love movies, but the world of entertainment has been shifting over the years, and now our options are broader than ever before. We may be waiting for movie theaters to reopen, but in the interim, we've got Netflix, HBO Max, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Hulu, Apple TV Plus, CBS All Access, and more to keep us busy. We've got more incredible movies to be excited about and discuss than ever before, so let's dig in. Welcome to the Film Board. On this episode, we are talking about Shaka King's new movie starring Daniel Kaluuya, Lakeith Stanfield, Jesse Plemons, and Dominique Fishback, to name a few, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party. Repeat after me. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary.
You're looking at 18 months for the stolen car, 5 years for impersonating a federal officer, or you can go home.
The Black Panthers are forming a rainbow coalition of oppressed brothers and sisters of every color.
Their aim is to sow hatred and inspire terror.
I will learn all that I can. These ain't no terrorists. You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
My name is Andy Nelson, host of The Next Reel, and today I'm chatting with two hosts from various Next Reel properties to get their thoughts on this movie so we can share them with all of you. Ocean!
Hello! Looking forward to having a lively discussion about a movie that I enjoyed quite a bit.
Awesome. And Ray?
Hey, I think Ocean brought a pool stick to a gunfight.
Right. Well, as we say on The Next Reel, when the movie ends, our conversation begins. So let's talk. Let's start up with some initial thoughts of Judas and the Black Messiah. Ocean, why don't you kick us off?
Look, I was in the tank for this movie the second I saw the trailer. So my initial thoughts were this was going to be a great movie, and it had to prove it would have to have proved my love for what I was seeing in this trailer wrong. And it did meet my expectations. I thought it was a very good movie, very well acted, great story, great perspective of the story, which was honestly a bit different than the perspective I was expecting to see. We can discuss more about that as we move forward. But initially, overall, loved the movie. Have a lot of great things to talk about, a lot of great things to say about it as we move forward.
All right. Ray, what about you?
Well, just like Ocean, I was pumped to see this ever since I saw the trailer. Just kind of sad that it didn't get to happen at the theater, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. We still got to see it. And it was great. I mean, I just can't wait to get into the details. Let's put it that way. Great stuff.
There are a lot of details to get into with this one. And, you know, my initial impression from the trailer was also, this is going to be a powerful film. Because the trailer featured a lot of Fred Hampton's speech, I am a revolutionary. And he was kind of doing that chant and kind of getting the crowd riled up. And it was like just thrilling to watch. And then, of course, there was the whole mystery of what's going on with Lakeith Stanfield's character, Bill. And clearly there's something with Jesse Plemons. You find out there's this whole FBI angle going on and that he's an informant. For somebody who sadly was not really familiar with this part of history, weirdly, until the trial of the Chicago 7 came out last year, I feel like this was a really great history lesson for me, just so that this is a a stronger place that I'm now coming from in this particular point in history. But yeah, it's a great film. So let's start talking about it. This is a biopic. I mean, we're looking at the story of these two characters largely, right? It's Fred Hampton, who is the chairman of the Black Panther Party chapter in Chicago, and Bill O'Neill, who is kind of a criminal, and the FBI picks him up, and he becomes an FBI informant. I should say he is kind of forced into becoming an FBI informant and has to infiltrate the party and get close to Fred Hampton. So we're watching these two characters primarily. It's Bill's story. We're following him through the course of the story. Lakeith Stanfield plays Bill, and Fred Hampton is played by Daniel Kaluuya. And it's really kind of this relationship biopic that we're following, but it starts off with these news clips that we're seeing. At the beginning, we're seeing kind of a news clip setting us up and everything, but we're also seeing an interview that took place in the 80s of Bill. It's in this particular, at the start of the film, it's played by Lakeith Stanfield as he's being interviewed for a documentary on PBS. And then, of course, it ends that way for us, where we actually see the real Bill O'Neill in that interview. How does that work for you two in context of the film? Does it work to kind of, in the world of biopics, I guess my question is, how does this feel in relation to so many others that we've seen?
I think that I don't want to say unique, because I feel like I can't think of any specific examples, but I feel like this isn't new per se, but it's definitely not a format that you see very often. And I loved the two parallel stories running alongside each other of Fred Hampton and Bill O'Neill, because they are two very different people, and they kind of got forced into one another's life, or rather Bill got forced into the Black Panther way of life. And I don't know the word for it. It's something.
Yes, it definitely is something. As far as biopics go, I think that it checked a couple of boxes for me. One, I thought it did a great job of conveying the passage of time. Now, it had the benefit of that the whole movie takes place in approximately, I think in real life, it's about a year. It's 16 months in real life. And then in the movie, the way that they do is kind of like about 8 or 9 months, right? So, but it does a good job of that. It does a good job of establishing who the characters are. It also does an interesting thing that I found, of the many things that are interesting, is that you do kind of, when you're watching this movie, view it as a relationship film. And it isn't really, I think, until further reflection that you realize that Fred Hampton and Bill O'Neill weren't really close friends, right? And they're not even close in the movie. There really aren't that. There's scenes where they're together, but it's never just the two of them hanging out talking about anything, right? It's like he's a part of the trajectory of things that are going on. And as an audience member, since you're coming at it from that perspective of Bill O'Neill, and then about Fred Hampton, you're kind of projecting a relationship on them that doesn't really exist, right? And so you are really kind of seeing two parallel tracks of life, right? For this period of time, there's what Bill O'Neill does, and then there's what Fred Hampton does, and then every now and again those things intersect. And so I thought it was a really great device to tell really kind of two stories that could turn into a nice 4-hour movie, and then condense it down to where it's a nice, streamlined, entertaining product.
To your point about the time, I do think it probably is about 16 months over the course of the film, because obviously we have a pregnancy almost from beginning to end in the film. So that's 9 months right there. Plus, it starts really with them meeting, right? With when I say them meeting, toward the very beginning of the film, we see when Fred meets Deborah. And that's at one of the initial, his initial rallies. And so I would imagine, yes, there's some time from that point to their relationship and getting pregnant and everything. So I think that the time frame is probably pretty accurate in the film to that 16 months that you were talking about. And in the world of biopics, this could have also been, we've seen these biopics where it explores a person's life from pretty much their childhood all the way through their death. Or through a big moment in their life. We've seen it in stuff like Ray, where we see a lot of moments of Ray Charles when he's a young boy all the way up through his life. And I feel like I appreciate this type of biopic a lot more. I don't get me wrong. I think some people do those sorts of biopics really well. And I think that it can work exceptionally when told the right way. But I also feel like it's a challenge for filmmakers when you're trying to cram a whole life into a cinematic story. And I really appreciate these stories that look at a smaller swath of a person's life, and we just get to see kind of a defining period in that life. And I think that this works really well in context of both Fred and Bill, really.
I couldn't agree more. I think that this movie, the way that it is done, perfectly captures the essence of both of these men. Look at Bill O'Neill, first of all. Like you said, we only see for, we're going to say, roughly 16 months. But at the very beginning of the movie, you see him going through this whole shtick of trying to jack someone's car. He gets picked up, and I love the scene where he meets Roy, and Roy asks him how he felt when Martin Luther King was assassinated and when Malcolm X was assassinated. And right there, that tells you a lot about his character. He is pretty much indifferent about it. And he has no feeling whatsoever outside of his own wants and needs. And as the movie progresses, even though, spoiler alert, ultimately he winds up doing what the FBI wants him to do, which ultimately leads to the death of Fred. And hats off to Lakeith Stanfield for this, because his performance, wow, but you really do see, like, in his eyes as the movie progresses, these things challenging him, morally, is what he's doing right. You can see him really struggle with that. And you can see that he is not the same person he was when he first got into this. And not similarly, but with Fred Hampton, you get a glimpse of what was most important about this man. I mean, in the movie, he says himself, I said I was going to give my life to this, and I'm going to give my life. And that is what you get. And you get the best parts of it, I think.
I think that, I think that you view Bill O'Neill more sympathetic than I do. His indifference ahead of time and everything does let you know what kind of a character he is, and that he was, and how he, had the crime, and then you had the felony hanging over him, and so then the FBI put him in the Black Panther Party. But I think that, the movie, the way it's portrayed, there is some difficulty seems to be in the scenes at the end about trying to drug Fred Hampton. But beyond that, I really feel the whole way that he's with the FBI. Right. He really, because when he first comes in, I mean, he is impersonating a federal agent, and that's what he's doing with his crimes. Right. That tells you right there. He does recognize there's the power of the badge, and he mentions that. But I think that there's also part of that is aspirational on his end. And the line that Roy Mitchell gives him about that the Klan and the Black Panthers are the same thing. I think that over time, as it goes, in moments in the movie where you think that Bill O'Neill would think, oh no, that's wrong, he starts to then believe more and more, no, that's right. And that he really is with the FBI the whole way, up until the drugging him part. Like, that part was a bit, there seemed to be some consternation, some issues that he had with potentially doing that in the film. But beyond that, I really feel that he was not conflicted as much as he felt he was doing a job.
That's interesting, because I do see the conflict in him. I don't think he's totally happy with the idea that he's going along with this FBI thing. I mean, he knows that he is going to go to jail or to prison if he doesn't go along with this. Like, he was impersonating an officer, Grand Theft Auto, like these different things that he was trying to do were big crimes. And so he'll go away for a while. And so I think that it's an interesting angle that I'm assuming was taken liberties with in the writing, because he is dead, as we find out at the end. Bill took his own life. I'm guessing that they kind of pulled that off of just their impressions of him. And I think that they probably took liberties in how they wrote it to be a more conflicted character, as somebody who was struggling, from time to time. I guess it's not all the way through, but I think the struggle, what I enjoy about the struggle in watching Bill, at least the way that I saw it, is that this is a character who is selfish, and it's all about what's in it for him. And it's not until he's like really starting to connect with the party, and he's seeing what Fred's doing, and he's seeing the Rainbow Coalition, and he's seeing how people are coming together and the great things that people are doing, that he does start identifying. And even Roy says when he talks to him late in the film, I saw you up there, and either you deserve an Academy Award or, you're actually believing this stuff. And I think that that's the power of watching Bill over the course of the film, because he actually does become somebody who really believes what the Black Panthers represent. And there's a lot of power in the way that he's portraying that. And it's a very complicated performance that I think he has to give. And that makes it so much more conflicting, because he does still have to go along with the FBI. He keeps wanting out, but they keep telling him, you can't leave. We have you. You're stuck with us, and you have to go through with it and kill and kill Fred. Here's the poison. And what I find really interesting about him as a character is that he consistently still takes the greedy choice, even right through to the end. He takes the keys, he takes the money, and now he's going to own his little gas station. And as we find out at the end, he worked for the feds through the 70s. Like, he continued another 10 years or so of being an informant. And I found that really fascinating. Like, this says a lot about a character who can't get away from that position of greed and that id satisfaction that he has, even when it's affecting what he's now coming to as far as his beliefs in what the party stands for.
Yeah, I can see we definitely get that from the movie, and it's a different impression than what I get from him. I think that to make the movie, in some aspects, as far as the artistic license was, to me, making him more sympathetic. To me, all the markers of his reality, the way he was at the beginning, the interview questions with him at the end, to me, that all speaks to that he, may have had moments of, I don't necessarily want to do this right now, but I really always felt that he was on board. The whole way.
Well, he asks him to get out 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the film. He's always I feel like every other time he sees Roy, he's like, okay, this is it. I'm not doing any more.
Yeah, I think there's some of that, but I don't think that that he wants to get out and then is going to then be a part of the Black Panther Party. I think he wants to get out just because he wants to not be beholden to the FBI for his own selfish needs. At no point in time, and I then do think he is the world's greatest actor. I don't think at any point in time, even when Fred Hampton's given the "I am a revolutionary" speech, and I'm actually yelling at the movie right along with him when he was saying it. I really thought I was into it more than Bill O'Neill was. I think that Bill O'Neill was playing a part, and also then when he saw Roy in the crowd, he kind of just kept kind of playing his part, saying, maybe he's trying to express some frustration at the hold and power that Roy has over him, but I don't think he ever fully believed. Right, because he had multiple instances of where he went above and beyond. Right, even with the shootout in the building. Right, when he went up to the top and then he held his gun out, that started to instigate the firing. He didn't have to do that. There was and he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do. There was certain things as far as either drawing out the blueprints of the apartment or doing some other things or wearing the wire with the explosives. I mean, he didn't have to go get C4, bring it to put in a trunk, bring it to them, and then wear a wire to try to get them to implicate themselves that they'd want to blow something up. I really feel that he was on board, and that it's great to think of the way that he is being acted and portrayed as if he's conflicted, but I just never bought that he was.
Interesting.
I think he was conflicted, but ultimately I do think you have to judge him by his actions, and ultimately he did. Like you said, Ocean, go along with the FBI. So
yeah. Before the film, how much about Fred Hampton did you two know? Were you familiar with this whole story already?
Not the whole story. I was familiar with him in terms of I knew who Fred Hampton was, insofar as I knew that he was the chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party in the 60s. I knew that he was shot and killed in his apartment. And that was pretty much it that I knew.
My knowledge of the Black Panthers was more on the Oakland Black Panthers, and I really had no real knowledge of Fred Hampton or the Chicago chapter. So this was all new to me, but I did a lot of reading before and after the movie.
I feel like we've hit a point in time in just everything going on in our world right now. I feel like there are stories like this that it's just prime for these stories to come out, because I think that there's a lot happening in our time that watching these stories, these historic stories, allows for us to really reflect on everything going on now. And so I feel like there's a real power to getting these stories out there right now, you know? And so it's just, I don't know, it's really exciting to see these stories. And I think it's important for people nowadays to have these so that they can really learn more about all the history and everything going on with all these moments and everything.
Yeah, I think that these movies are definitely a good gateway drug to get you to get anybody to learn more about the history of the times that they're portraying and about these people and then their lives and their struggles. I think that is going to be definitely a good thing. I find that the stories are empowering insofar as you're learning new stories about, you know, hopefully people that you don't necessarily know the fullness of their stories before. There's part of it that is also discouraging to me in that it's like, well, when you start listening to things Fred Hampton was saying, it's like, well, we're still asking for that now. Right. You know, that it's been 50 years and you still have a lot of the same things that you want to have, you know, that he was asking for then that you'd want to have happen now. And so it's interesting in looking at the historical arc and how, you know, there are aspects of things over the course of time in history that are going to be better, but then also to reflect back to say, hey, you know, not every idea we have now is new. You know, some of them were being asked for before, and that there are a lot of lessons we can learn from the people in our history.
So what moments in the film really stand out for you two? Like, are there moments that like really hit, like, oh, that this scene or those scenes are the ones that this movie, like, that's what this is all about?
Well, for me, there's the speech about being a revolutionary and, you know, the context of what he's saying there. Not only, you know, I think where he is priming the pump for is at the time, I think Fred Hampton recognizes that he is not necessarily going to be long for this world. And so I think he's trying to prime the pump for, hey, this movement is about the principles that we're looking for to achieve, not about me as a person. Where he kept on saying about how you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. You can kill a freedom fighter, but you can't kill freedom, right? So I think that is, you know, that scene, what that means in terms of that, you know, he's trying to say, hey, this needs to be more than just one person, more than just one or two people. That is the principles that we're fighting for, and the freedom and the freedom and liberation, and the, you know, people having more power needs to be a thing that continues on throughout. So that scene to me really does, you know, really hits home for me in a lot of different ways. And also to the other part of that scene was in the middle of the speech there, you can tell there's a time when Deborah, when she grabs her stomach, because I think she recognizes as well that he is talking as if he's going to die soon. And she's now thinking differently. Like when they first met, you know, he's a revolutionary freedom fighter. We're good. You know, if you're going to give your life to this, I'm 100% on board. Well, now that there's a baby involved, she's like, well, hang on a second. I'm all right with a lot of things, but I don't want you dying. Right. You know, and that dichotomy in that speech of where he's really kind of proclaiming and saying who he is and what he stands for. And she agrees with that, but still has to then wrestle with the conflict of that she wants this man to stay alive and be in her and her baby's life.
That added another layer to that scene that you didn't definitely see in the trailer. And because we already had, I mean, that was a powerful moment already. We have this incredibly powerful, rousing speech that he's giving in this particular moment. Then we have Bill and the FBI agent, locking eyes, and kind of there's that whole element going on. And then we have Deborah paying attention to her husband in that particular moment. It's just like, there's a lot of stuff going on in that scene. It was really incredibly constructed and powerful on so many different levels. Yeah. How about you, Ray?
The one scene that keeps coming back to me is the scene where Lakeith Stanfield goes into the office and finds that they're harboring a wanted man, George Sams, and he tells the story about how they found a rat, someone who was an informant, and they killed him. The way that they wrote that scene, I thought was interesting, because they go into a lot of detail about, well, first of all, they went into a lot of detail about what they did to the rat. You know, how they found, whenever they pulled his body out of the river, they found cigarette burns on him, and they poured boiling water on him and things like that. And in a way, it reminded me of the Harry Belafonte scene in Black Klansman, just because of how brutal the killing was. But I think it's one of those moments where Lakeith Stanfield really did well, because Bill O'Neill, at least as portrayed here in the movie in this scene, has a moment where you really see him start to question things in his mind. Again, hats off to Lakeith Stanfield, because as I'm watching him in this scene, I am 100% in his mind thinking, oh crap, this could very well happen to me. What am I going to do? And in the meantime, I'm here listening to them tell the story. Am I looking guilty because I look worried? Are they going to think that I'm a rat? And it was just a very tense moment, I thought.
I mean, I think that's a strong scene in the sense that you really get an impression as to an eye-opening scene for Bill, because all of a sudden he realizes what could actually happen to him. And it's almost like he'd been going through this up to this point before without even realizing that.
Yes, because he actually is a rat. And so therefore he has that concern. And I think that it does actually, though, the second half, or at least, well, it's not the second half of that scene. To me, the second part of that, second punch of that scene is when Roy Mitchell is going to his superior's office and then kind of relaying this information, to his superior. And then they find out that, that Sam's is the informant, and he did kill the person that they, that they're claiming that he killed. And they're kind of using him as a backward way to arrest whoever they want to, because they can say, well, our informant is now a wanted man. So if he's with you, then you're with a wanted person. So we're going to arrest you. And to me, the power of that second half of that, I thought was a great device about, it made Roy Mitchell's character a bit more complicated, right? Because early on, he's just, he's an FBI guy. He's just coming. He's basically, doing J. Edgar Hoover's marching orders, and he's just, kind of like, you're a big bad guy, evil, that's going to take down the evil Black Panthers, right? And as the movie progresses, of course, you're going to have a different perspective. But then for him, of the Black Panthers, right? But then with Roy Mitchell's character, you can see over time, it's like, no, he truly believes that the Black Panthers and the Klan are the same thing, and this need to be stopped for your basic criminal reasons. And in that moment, in that scene, when he's being told what his superiors are doing with the informant, you could see in his face kind of the disillusionment leave him, right? That he really thought that they were on the side of right, and now he no longer does. But he recognizes that it's gotten enough publicity, it's gotten high enough of the chain. J. Edgar Hoover himself is paying attention. And so therefore his career needs to keep going on the trajectory to get this to a resolution. But I feel in that moment, the FBI agent lost his innocence. And I thought that was a very powerful moment and scene in the movie.
Yeah, Jesse Plemons is such an underrated actor. And the way that he carries scenes is just, he's just fascinating to watch. This guy, I love everything he's done. I've just always been impressed with him. And that there were several things going on with the FBI that I found really interesting. One, I think it was just, I loved the way they wrote it, where every time, like when he came and reported what was going on, his superiors already knew about all of it. Like they were already in the know on all of that. And then later when his superiors are reporting to Hoover already knows everything, because it's like, that's how Hoover operated, right? Like everyone was always spying on each other. And I was like, that seemed very telling that that's the way it was. And another moment that I think also, to your point, Ocean, about kind of him losing his innocence, it was that, oh my God, it was a painful scene to watch when Hoover is like asking him about his family, and they have that whole conversation, and he's just like, talking about his daughter who's an infant, and he's saying stuff like, what are you going to do when she brings a Negro home and stuff, and quoting the movie. Yeah. But it's just like this, and it hits him, and he has to kind of have this conversation with J. Edgar Hoover about this, and how horrifying, and it's a moment of recognition that all of a sudden it's like there's, he has to all of a sudden put himself into this other world, because Hoover,
flaming racist.
I worked on a documentary about Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Yeah, but I worked on a documentary about Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and you can see in these law enforcement agencies how they create these top-down structures, and whatever they say, they push down to the lower ranks, and everybody really has to just kind of go along with it. And in these tough on crime in these situations, whatever J. Edgar Hoover says goes, and you have to do it. And that was a really telling moment to see him go through that with Hoover in that very painful moment and realize, okay, he's an FBI agent, and, they're not necessarily the side that we're on in the course of this film. But how interesting to see the scene play out that way, right?
Yes, no, I very much so agree, and I think that, and that was the part that I appreciate about the complexity. We are clearly in this movie, you're not going to be on the side of the FBI, but in the individual of Roy Mitchell, early on, you can see it's just he has the incorrect impression of what they are, but he still thinks he's doing what is right. And it is painful to see, and really very well acted on Jesse Plemons' part to convey and emote that true loss of innocence, and also where his character pivots, right? He goes from what I would say is misguided, right? In that he had misguided, preconceived notions of what things were, but still was looking for legitimate crime. Pivoting to like, okay, my superiors want this to happen. We're not on the side of right. I'm not going to lose my career over this. Let's get this over with, right? And then that's when we started ramping up. I need more information. I need the blueprints. I need you to draw out what's there. I need you to, when you started getting, I need to Fred Hampton. We need to get this done. And I think that that's kind of where he was that he was like, well, now that I no longer feel that we're fighting for what's right, I want to get this where I can move on. Yeah,
you see that with his in that scene you're talking about with Bill, where that's where he kind of like, it's almost like he's no longer the Bill or the Roy that Bill knew, because Roy says, well, you got him. Why do you need this? And he's just like, it's none of your business. You just have to do it. And it's like he's never really been that guy before. And so that was it was like that was the switch. That's something that he's now gone through because of this whole thing. So
I was just going to say such a cold scene for that character.
For a guy who's like welcoming him into his house and saying, oh, the good liquor's down there, have at it. It's down on the bottom shelf. Like, he's a really congenial guy. Like, he's this really kind guy that we kind of like, right? And now he's hit this point where he's just like this cold FBI agent. Like, he has also had that switch, and he's kind of following orders now.
Yes.
Let's talk about some of these performers. We have some incredible performances in this film, and we really shouldn't be beating around the bush too much longer, because Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield own this film. They are acting powerhouses from beginning to end. What do you two think about these guys?
Goodnight, Gracie. These two are phenomenal. I mean, seriously, both of them, if they do not get nominated for all the awards, then I think that they're all shams, like certain people in the Discord community say they are.
Yes, they do a great job as far as the acting goes. I think that the things that I appreciated most about their performances, a lot of it was some of the little scenes like when Bill O'Neill is kind of caught after they have the meeting with the Crowns, and then he's the other Black Panther lady has a gun to him, and they're making him hotwire the car right then. Right, it really looked like, and did a good job of saying, like, I thought he was making it up, right? Like, because you didn't believe he could hotwire the car, and you really got the feeling of, in his performance, that, okay, I know enough to pop off the thing, and I've seen people do this with some wires, and it looked like he was kind of just like slowly touching them slightly to see which ones do it, and then be like, okay, yeah, those are the right ones, right? And the ability to convey that, I mean, that's a little thing, right? The people are going to give actors credit for the big things they do, like, the big speeches or the big moments, or they're crying or whatever. But I think things like that, or the pivot that Daniel Kaluuya does with Fred Hampton's doing speeches. He's super powerful. He's bigger than he's super bombastic. He's bigger than life, right? And then there's the quiet moment of he and Deborah in the kitchen, right? And she's like, "Well, I'm surprised that you're shy," right? And he really does come across like like a shy little kid, because and part of the thing is he is since he's bigger than life and everything, and as he is there, he is really portraying someone who is 21 years old. Right. And at 21, when it came to, talking to girls and everything like that, especially if you haven't done it a lot, you would be, kind of shy. And the ability to pull both emotions off, right? To be able to pull the I'm going to be fighting and I'm going to be fighting and really really aggressive and yelling and doing what we need to do to then build a coalition to be together and better people. Then also the pivot to be like, well, yeah, but around this girl, I'm really shy. I don't talk, hopefully she likes me, right? And so I think that those aspects, being able to pull off those pivots, going back and forth throughout the movie, I think really demonstrates how both of these actors did a wonderful job throughout the film.
You mentioned the car scene with him trying to hotwire the car. I thought that one of the most standout scenes for me, for Lakeith Stanfield, was right after he and Kaluuya have the argument about the C4. They almost get into a fight, and Lakeith Stanfield gets in his car and he drives away, and he's just really angry. If you just watch him as he starts to drive away, as I'm watching this movie, my thoughts, my emotions were heightened, and my thoughts were, I was thinking, okay, he's with them now. He is with the cause. He wants to try to, take care of the opposition, so to speak. And then you see him take the wire out from under his shirt, and you realize what his true motivations were. And you also see he's not crying per se, but you see his eyes start to well up. And it's just such an avalanche of emotions. And I was just so taken aback at how well he was conveying all of this.
It really comes through. And especially when you do see the real Bill at the end in that small clip in the PBS documentary, Eyes on the Prize 2, and you get that little glimpse of him there at the end. And it's just a very brief scene where he's talking about, what would you say to your son? And that whole thing. It's a powerful little bit there, and it's a really interesting moment that highlights, for me, a lot of kind of just the internal pain that he was dealing with and everything, or at least that's how I'm interpreting it. And I think Lakeith carries that so incredibly well throughout the film. I'm really happy with the structure of the script, and that we got to spend so much time with Bill, because I felt like there was a really interesting connection with him, and the way that he evolved, and just watching Stanfield do that over the course of the film was brilliant. But I mean, honestly, Kaluuya was magnetic. I mean, he carried the role of Fred Hampton so incredibly well. It was just mesmerizing to watch him. And I feel like, and again, I've only seen the bits of Fred Hampton's speeches that I watched in the film, so I haven't seen anything else. And in one of the behind the scenes things. But I mean, he just had an amazing presence and magnetism, and the way that he spoke and drew people in and welcomed people, and really practiced what he preached. And this whole idea of building this rainbow coalition, it was just what an actor, and what a challenging performance, especially when, it involves the love story. And that's what I love so much about how Dominique Fishback's character of Deborah comes into the story early on as this woman who can see, you're good, but your scripts are all over the place, and if there's one thing that I wish that we had more of, would have been her helping him flesh stuff out, so that you were really kind of making these stronger speeches and stuff. Because I do feel like from the time we're watching the speeches at the end, and seeing where we started from, I feel like there's definitely an improvement. But I just their relationship was so strong, and that's what I really loved about it, is just, this is a relationship film in several different ways.
They hint at it a little bit because she's a speechwriter, in the job when she gets there. So they hint at that she is helping him out and do that. But I do think that I was very pleasantly surprised at how well Dominique Fishback and Daniel Kaluuya, their chemistry to pull off really a love story in a movie that is not a love story. right?
Yeah,
Their love story is going to be the fourth or fifth point you're going to come away from with this, right? But the not only the chemistry between the two actors, because Dominique Fishback really has, I would say, a limited amount of screen time, right? But be able to take that limited amount of screen time, make it where she then is an impactful character throughout the movie, right? Because I mean, in real life, she's a very impactful woman in Fred Hampton's story, so she should be an impactful character in this movie. But to be able to then convey that with the limited amount of screen time and limited amount of limited time you have on there, it really kind of conveys how well they were doing with the acting. And also I would give a slight nod to the directing there, right? Because it does take it's kind of at least a bit of a three-way dance there to make it where you can take these small moments and make them impactful throughout the movie. So you remember, even though she hasn't been on screen for 20 minutes, you still remember and care about her character when she comes back.
The poem scene when he's kind of looking in her book and she's like, don't look at that. And then he has her read one to him. That really struck me. Like, that scene defined that relationship so much, about the fight and about the fear of, the fight to kind of, with the Panthers and to do so much more, but then also the underlying fear of, am I a bad mother? I'm bringing a baby into this world. What are we doing? Like, all of this sort of stuff. I was like, that was such an emotionally powerful scene. It hit home. It was just strong stuff.
I agree. The other thing, for talking about some of the rest of the acting, I do think they had a lot of good acting from some of the supporting characters, right? So like I think it was Ashton Sanders, who was Jimmy Palmer, and Al G. Smith as Jake Winters, right? They're basically, I think that they also did a great job, not only being able to very quickly build the relationship as friends, but then also you got to kind of see their journeys as an aside as well, to see that this wasn't all just about one person or one, this wasn't just Fred Hampton's story alone or Bill O'Neill's story alone. There were other characters as well that had different run-ins with the police, they both were, Jimmy's then killed in the hospital. And then, Jake has I don't know if he called a breakdown, but you'd have it where he's really trying to find out more information about his friend and then ends up in the warehouse and then kills the cops and then is ultimately murdered himself. Right. And so I think that they did a lot of, I think you saw good performances really all around. And I think that's one of the things I think is a strength of this movie, is that there was no one that I felt was either doing a horrible job or I looked at and thought, well, they're just really acting. I mean, there's moments where, honestly, the closest it comes to me is that there's moments with Martin Sheen saying stuff, but then it's because his voice is so Jebediah Bartlett to me that it was kind of weird to hear him, to hear him say these other things. So I was like, Jed, these don't align with your political views. I've seen you for seasons, right? And so there's some of that, but these little pieces here and there all kind of fit well. And I think, there is a nod to the actor for that, of course, but I think also then, and this might be a little bit my segue to kind of give the director some credit about, to be able to weave all these different stories together. You have the one big long story, but then to be able to weave these little stories in that are powerful statements of things. Like, Jake's death. I mean, Jake's on the screen for what? 3 minutes total, and his death is not only a statement on friendship, situations that have gone awry, the way you can do things incorrectly, but then also the scene with his mother afterwards, where it's like, he did, he did this thing, and this thing was bad, but this isn't everything of it that he did. Right. And to be able to then get that from those little pieces and everything and to weave that through the grander story of Bill O'Neill's relationship with Fred Hampton, I think is really part of where, and I think maybe here I am I'm giving credit to the actors. I really think I might be praising the director. So I'm here with that was really great storytelling.
Well, I mean, the actors are obviously carrying a lot of the weight. I mean, they're the ones in front of us doing it. And so, you're calling out some great names. I just also want to throw out Lil Rel Howery, who he's credited as Wayne, but I never remember the name being said, but other than calling him Slick at one point, he's the guy who is the other FBI guy undercover
in the bar
who gives Bill the poison. And I was like, that was just like a fantastic costume and hair makeup job that they did with him, because he was very, very well disguised. But I loved seeing him pop up in here after just totally loving him so much in Get Out a few years ago. So yeah, really fantastic casting.
That was him?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He's the best friend from Get Out.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page now.
Yep,
Okay.
Yeah. So I really thought that they did an incredible job with just bringing all these people in. So, but yeah, you mentioned the director, Shaka King. This is his second feature film. But really, it's kind of the big one, right? I mean, I don't think the previous film was anything too big. It was called Newlyweds from 2013. Yeah. Just kind of an indie pop film, which I don't know if it got much buzz at all.
Got much buzz.
Hey, look at you. Yeah. He did win, Shaka King did win at the Film Independent Spirit Awards, the Someone to Watch Award. So obviously there were people who were saying we need to pay attention to this particular person. And now here we are. Let's talk about the direction a little bit. How did you two feel that Shaka, did it feel like this was a director with an assured hand? Did it feel like this is a director who still has some learning to do? What'd you think?
This was solid, man. I mean, at no point at all during this movie did I think that this was an amateur or somebody that hadn't done that much work behind the camera. This was very, very well done. This might sound really dumb, but hear me out. The shots that really stick out to me were the shots in the car. Especially that very first shot whenever Lakeith Stanfield asks for a car to get closer to Fred. And you have that shot where you're watching the buildings kind of go by, and then it starts to turn slowly and face the car. I don't know why, but that shot just really sticks out to me. And then the shots of Stanfield backing up whenever he's leaving the headquarters. They use that shot a couple of times. Just really like how solid this whole movie felt.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have much more to add. I've been already praising the direction for the past 5 minutes now. So yeah, I think he did a really good job. I look forward to. I enjoyed this outing, and I do look forward to what he's going to make next.
Yeah, if anything, I felt like there were some points where maybe the pacing could have been tightened up a little bit. But I mean, I feel like it is kind of a minor complaint. Like I don't feel like, in context of a director who really kind of just tells a solid story, I think that this is a director who really is doing that. And I think he has a perspective, and I think he is creating the world and sticks with it the whole time. I was very impressed. There's nothing in it that, it's not like I'm watching, a Scorsese or Spike Lee or somebody who really has their stamp. Like there's nothing in this film that like I'm already saying, oh, this is a Shaka King film. Like there's nothing like that. And that's never a problem. I just know that there are certain directors who really kind of have their stamp, and you'll always be able to tell their particular films. And it might be hard. I mean, maybe there is something in here that will be something that kind of we come to feel, oh, that is kind of a Shaka King defining feature. But as it stands right now, I feel like those sorts of things are hard to come by in biopics. It's a story about someone's life, and so you're by nature trying to tell a true story, and so it's a little harder to throw those things in and be more and have them be that recognizable. But I think Shaka King does an incredible job of creating this period in the late 60s, early 70s in Chicago. Like I feel like the look of the film, it's got this kind of grit to it, and not necessarily meaning like the whole thing is dirty or anything like that, but it just feels like authentic. It just
feels lived in.
That's a great way to describe it. And it just, I love, like, even just the lighting scheme. Like there were some shots in this, I'm just like, oh, it's just beautiful setups, the way that they lit the scenes and shot them. Yeah, I feel all of that worked really well. And that was a great comparison to when we jump into the world of the FBI. And it's such a clean cut difference, right? Like the feds have such a, like, I feel like we're always in some fancy restaurant when we're with Roy, or their offices. Everything is just so clean cut.
Sterile work environment.
Well, okay, so Shaka King, we like. The look of the film, we like.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the themes, because this is a pretty heavy film. There's a lot of themes. I mean, there's a lot of messages anyway coming from what Fred was preaching, right? Heighten the contradiction. That's brought up. Where there's people, there's power. This whole idea of a rainbow coalition. All of these things, I think, are such strong elements for us to start talking about, especially now in 2021, where there has been a lot of more tension in our country. How did you feel the film carried the themes?
I think they did a good job with really a couple of them. Where there's people, there's power. That's actually, I've been looking up after this movie, found that there was actually a speech by Fred Hampton that is titled that, and that it did a good job of showing a theme throughout. That really what he was looking for was to bring the people together, like the scene when they're talking about war is politics with bloodshed, politics is war without bloodshed, right? Then when they're talking about the teachings of things, right? That it is more about bringing the people together, and that we're not trying to fight fire with fire. We're trying to fight fire with water, right? We're not trying to, so that we're trying to just get the people together to come together on on really their common interests, right? And that ties into with the Rainbow Coalition, which has been a term that has been appropriated by others, since this time, most famously by Jesse Jackson. But it, the idea that, hey, we have this, and this is the 60s, right? So there's a lot of different racial divides, right? Which there are racial divides today, right? But then in the 60s, they were more, right? They were more pronounced in a lot of different ways that were concrete and people could see. And that it was like, hey, why don't we actually, instead of, which was interesting at the time too, don't worry about these divides. It doesn't matter if we're black, white, Hispanic, Latino, whatever, that, hey, we're all poor and oppressed, and we come together and unite as a people, we can then rise up and improve our station and improve this life.
One of the things that I don't know if you guys would have taken this away, because I feel like I kind of pulled this one in from out of left field a little bit. But one thing that I think I got out of this movie was how there really are the perspectives on issues like the Black Panthers. Are they a danger? Are they not a danger? For example, it's not always cut and dry. It's not always black and white. No pun intended. And you wonder, like, if you had been living at the time, you would wonder, are the Black Panthers a danger, or the police justified at all in wanting to bring them down, or are they really standing for something and doing it right? And history is written by the victors. The one at the very end of the movie, we see what really happened to Fred and to the people that were in his apartment. It tells you in the titles at the end of the movie there what happened afterward, how the police said that these people were resisting arrest and they were firing back and this and that and the other. And then it wasn't until years later that you find out that 99 shots were fired by the police and only one shot was fired by the Black Panthers. And that one shot was because they had killed the one guy keeping guard, and whenever they killed him, his body reacted and pulled the trigger of the gun he was holding. So I think that stuck with me as a theme, just how you really need to, not everything is cut and dried, not everything is black and white. There are so many layers to these things.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And that's what I really appreciate about the film, is that they paint all the characters fully fleshed out. Like, it's not just the good guys or the bad guys, but everybody has a real sense of kind of being a real character. And you don't often always see that. And it's nice to get a sense that they were really working on trying to kind of make sure we felt a sense of all of these people. So it was powerful. I mean, the themes in this film, everything in it really kind of came through in a very powerful way. It's just, I thought that they did an incredible job getting the message across. Looking at the technical side of the film, the only thing that, we talked about the look in the camera a little bit, but I will say, I thought the music was great. I loved they had those discordant horn hits throughout the score. And I was just like, that was a really interesting way to kind of play. It was almost like the two characters. It was like almost the notes were representative of these two characters and kind of like this clash. And I thought that was just powerful. So
for sure, the music was so terrific in this movie.
I agree.
Any last thoughts?
In looking at the theme of the movie as a whole and everything, I felt that it was misnamed. And so the reason I feel it was misnamed is that, because it's Judas and the Black Messiah, right? Hence implying that, that you have a turncoat inside of your organization or something like that. And so I think that really what I felt, and part of it is, and I'll get to it as far as the ending scene is really where it kind of solidified this thought for me, was Judas. In the story with Judas betraying Christ, he was a believer, right? He went to the Romans and he got the 30 pieces of silver, but his thought was that Jesus was then going to rise up and demonstrate to the Romans and everyone in the world that he was God. And he was a real believer in this, and it just went, a different way, right? But Bill O'Neill wasn't a believer. Right. And he wasn't like a member of the Black Panther Party that the FBI then turned. Right. They put him in that position, and that really he's not a Judas. I think of him. He's an infiltrator. Right. He's an infiltrator, he's an undercover cop. And I think that a lot of the things about, how he was with them and how he was with the characters throughout the film is a reflection of he did start to get to know them and care about them as people, but it was not vastly dissimilar than you see with an undercover operative that is an undercover cop's taking down a drug kingpin, hangs out with him enough after a while, does think of him as a good person, right? But still does his job. A lot of that to me crystallized, and I was at the, I was feeling this way throughout most of the film, and it crystallized for me at the end when they show him in the interview and the question of what would you tell your son, to say that I wasn't some armchair revolutionary sitting on the sideline. I did what I had a position, I had a stance, and I did the things that I did. And also, which I don't remember if he says this in the movie or when I just looked up the interview later, but he also does mention how he never felt that he doesn't feel that he betrayed Fred Hampton or the Black Panthers or anything, because he wasn't a member. He wasn't a believer and a part of that group. Really, what he was at all times, all the way throughout, was someone who was infiltrating them to take down, take them down. And so I feel that it was interestingly misnamed. I mean, it works in that, that it's called that, but it to me, I felt that Judas, because he wasn't a believer, he wasn't a Judas. He's something else.
Do you prefer the original title, Jesus Was My Homeboy?
So, if that was the original title, that's funny. And if it was, then yes, I think that would have been better titled, because that would have been more fitting. They were homies, they hung out and everything, but he wasn't, he wasn't a believer.
Well, I would disagree with you about the title. I actually think sure. Yes, if you really read into it, I can very much see your point. But at the same time, I think that the title really says a lot about kind of this story and everything. So I think it's an interesting title, and I love titles that actually have a lot in it, and it makes me actually think about it, as opposed to plenty of films with very forgettable titles. And you hear the title and you're like, what is that movie about? I don't even remember, because sometimes titles are so bad. So if nothing else, I do think that the title helps us stand out.
Yeah. And something, I think I see totally where you're coming from with him not being a believer with the Black Panthers thing. But I think that Bill O'Neill, at least as he's portrayed in this movie, and Judas Iscariot in the Bible are very, very similar, because they're both very selfish people. And one thing that I was actually thinking about during the movie was how in the Bible, there's the scene where Jesus and his disciples are at the home of the sisters, Martha and Mary washes the feet of Christ and then dries his feet with her hair and pours this really expensive ointment on his feet. And Judas, instead of, being in reverence of Christ at this moment, think selfishly, that's expensive ointment. We could have sold that and gotten some money, and I could have had some of that money. And that, I think, is a perfect parallel for who Bill O'Neill is in this movie. He's only looking out for number one.
Interesting. Well, it's a powerful film, no matter how you slice it, whatever it's called. I think that they did an incredible job putting this together with an incredible cast, well directed. I think it's something that everybody should see at some point. Just, really start getting a handle on this part of our history. And weirdly, it does pair, interestingly, with Trial of the Chicago 7, since they do kind of take place right around the same period of time in Chicago. But personally, I would say this is the better film. And since we're talking about, better films and rankings and stuff, let's talk about our Letterboxd rankings. So over at letterboxd.com, you can rank your films on a 5-star scale with half stars. And, we love the people at Letterboxd. Letterboxd provides discounts for anyone listening to our shows. You can get a 20% discount on your pro and patron memberships. And even renewals. You just go to thenextreel.com/letterbox and you can get that discount. So, Ocean, what would you give this out of 5 stars? Where would you land?
Well, let's be honest. I opened it on Front Street. I started in the tank of this movie and I never got out of the tank. So for me, it's just 5 stars and a heart. I loved everything about this movie.
Yeah, it's a solid film. Ray, what about you?
4.5 and a heart for me.
And for me, I'm also 4.5 and a heart. I think that there's very little there's so few problems with this film. I mean, I did have some pacing issues throughout, and biopics are tricky anyway. But I think that this film is it has a sense of urgency. It's something that feels relevant very much to today and needs to be seen. It's an incredible story and one that is told very well and performed very well. So, all right, gents, let's wrap this thing up. Last thoughts. Any final remarks on the movie, Ocean?
The only thing I can add is you definitely should go out and go see it. There's tons of themes. It's a lot of things to unpack about it. And I encourage anyone that does see it to let it be the springboard to learn more about that time in history and these people.
How about you, Ray?
After seeing this movie, I'm just really excited to see what's next for Kaluuya, Stanfield, and Shaka King.
It's a strong film, worth checking out, everybody. So give it a chance. Next up on the film board, our second film for February, we're going to be looking at Nomadland, which is coming out in just a week. Chloe Zhao's new film with Frances McDormand as somebody roving around the country in her motorhome. It's getting a lot of good buzz. It's going to be a fun one to talk about. So join me here in just 1 week. We'll talk about that film. Don't forget to join our online community with fellow movie lovers. You can learn more at thenextreel.com/discord. And if you're interested in supporting us to help us keep the lights on, and you can get some great benefits while you're at it, head to thenextreel.com/membership. That's it, everybody. Thanks for joining us to talk about Judas and the Black Messiah here at The Next Reel. When the movie ends, our conversation begins.